All right. Hey, how are you doing? My name is Chris.
My name is Cameron.
And this is SolarEdge Night Mode, an after-hours happy hour for solar enthusiasts and solar professionals out there.
Absolutely.
How are you doing today?
Man, I am doing fantastic. Looking forward to the weekend, but yeah, things are going well. How about you?
Not doing too bad. I'm just getting ready to pour myself a frosty beverage now that it's 5 o'clock.
Fantastic. I'm drinking Modern Times Mocha Madhouse. It's a nice stout with hints of coffee and chocolate. Cocoa nibs, if you will.
That's a really nice color.
This is going to be my dinner. I'm just kidding.
And we should say, absolutely, make sure that if you are drinking, drink safely and drink responsibly. Our wives are going to be picking us up after this. What are they doing this week?
I thought this week they're doing underwater basket weaving.
That's right, underwater basket weaving. I love
Yes.
underwater basket weaving. The one thing I don't like about it is the rental fee for the scuba gear.
Yeah, I mean,
Way too much.
That's not a thing.
Oh.
So, what are we talking about today? I think you told me we're going to do something a little bit different.
Yeah, today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to be taking a look at things from the homeowner's perspective.
Homeowner.
In this case, our scenario is this. Solar Bro just came knocking on your door, and he's telling you all these things. He's telling you'll never pay another electric bill again. Sales guys are usually really, really nice, but occasionally you do get that bro that's a little bit pushy.
Sure.
This is because I recently had a solar bro come to my house, and being in the industry, I know how to talk to them a little bit, so I was able to kind of shoo him away.
Yeah.
But he went over and talked to my neighbor and was really pushy with them, and they've already got a solar system on their house, but that could have had some very big financial repercussions for him if he had actually added panels to his system, because that would have changed his interconnect agreement, because
Yes.
he was currently under NEM 2, and I am in California along with you.
Yep.
NEM 2 is an agreement with your utility on how much they pay you back.
Yeah. So let's start at the basic. So again, we're like you said, it's homeowner focus. So I know it sounds like your neighbor came and talked to you after he was gone.
Yeah. So, we just talked about a system. Let's go ahead and just kind of run through that conversation. If you're a homeowner and you're thinking about putting solar on your house, here are the basic things that you should know, just at a very high level. So
Yeah, I'm with you.
Can we start talking about like solar panels to start with?
Sure. Let's talk about PV panels. So interestingly enough, we are in 2025 now, and PV panels have really come down in cost. But with the tariffs and manufacturing costs increasing, that may change. But for right now, panels are still less expensive than they ever have been before. Now, there are some panels that have like different technologies. You can say, oh, it's perk cell, they're half-cut cells, they're thin film, they're monocrystalline, they're polycrystalline. Those are all just fancy words. What it comes down to at the end of the day is a solar panel is a watt, and they're either 400 watts a day or maybe 410 watts a day for residential applications. So what you're paying for is the amount of energy or wattage power that it produces. And that's really fundamentally the only difference between panel A, panel B, and panel C. Now, you could dive into the weeds, and certainly there are differences between them, but for homeowners, it's really just what number are you getting?
So, 400, 425.
Exactly.
That's just how much power you've got.
Exactly. What I think is the biggest impact on your investment is your inverter. So while it only represents like maybe 5 to 10% of the cost of your entire system, it has the largest impact on how much revenue you're going to generate, because that's what's converting your energy.
Okay, we'll talk about inverters next, but I want to just briefly touch on the rating that we're talking about on our panels. So when we see a rating on the panel that says 425 watts, that's like perfect light, perfect angle, perfect temperature,
Right.
Flash the thing, and that's the rating that you get. But that's not reality. What can we see in real life?
Oh, yeah, sure. So in North America, typically we see 80% of that. And that's just because there's particulates in the air, whether it's smog or dust or something. There's things in the air that block sunlight from getting to your solar panel. So if you have, let's say you have a 400 watt panel, typically you're only going to see about 320 watts come from that, and that if it's facing south in the North American region. If it's at an ideal pitch or angle to the sun. And then, of course, if you face your modules east-west, you're going to take another 20% hit on that. So that kind of stacks up a little bit. So you're never going to realize 400 watts out of that solar panel unless they're in, like you said, ideal lab test condition. So we call that STC rating or standard test condition.
So we can expect roughly 80%. So if I've got, a 10,000 watt system on my roof, in reality, it's an 8,000 watt system.
Exactly, which is why you'll see a lot of salespeople or installers recommend that you have 10,000 watts of DC on the roof, and they'll recommend a smaller inverter, and they'll give you like a 7.6 kilowatt inverter.
The other reason for that being shading from trees or just less than ideal light conditions in general.
Exactly. So all those things play a factor into how we size the inverter. Yeah.
Panels, roughly speaking, very little difference in between different manufacturers, maybe a bit of quality difference.
Sure.
What you want to look at is the actual rating, the STC rating, and you can expect roughly 80%.
Roughly 80%. That's a good value.
Okay,
80%. And if there's, of course, if there's dirt on it, a visible layer of dust on your solar panels, it's going to be less. And so the best thing I can tell homeowners is a lot of monitoring today comes with panel level data. And if you're looking at every single panel and what it's producing at any given point in the day, just keep in mind you're probably going to take an 80 to 60% haircut on the total power just at any given moment.
So that's why installers will add extra panels to kind of deal with all those shading issues.
Yep.
So let's talk about inverters. So let's say our example here is we've got 10,000 watts on the roof, and we've got a 7,600 watt inverter, which is very common.
Yeah.
We're never going to produce 10,000 watts with a 7,600 watt inverter. True. We're just oversizing the roof to make sure that we're compensating for environmental conditions.
Yeah. So if we look at our power production throughout the day, it has a very nice bell distribution curve. So if you've ever taken a statistics class, you'd see this nice big bell curve, right? So power production looks a lot like that when your modules are facing to the south. And the idea is that the inverter, even though it's got 10,000 watts of solar and the inverter maybe max power is underneath it, that you raise the shoulders of your bell curve a little bit. And we call this thing the DC to AC ratio. And it just means you're going to produce more energy throughout the day. You're clipping a little bit of power, but not a lot of power. And we don't get paid for power, we get paid for energy. So that's power over time. Watt hour is what your bill says, right? And so just that energy production will be better throughout the lifetime of the system. So that's why we raise the shoulders. But too much clipping can greatly impact your system.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Let's go and talk about the different types of inverters, starting with the old tried and true since 1980.
Yeah, string inverters.
The string inverter.
So I've installed and been around string inverters all my life, and they hold a near and dear, special place in my heart. Because, like I said, I've been in the solar industry for 21 years, and I started with string inverters. Now, string inverters, the technology has changed a little bit, but fundamentally, they are low-cost solutions. So that's their best benefit, is they are low cost. You're not replicating parts on the roof. They're low cost. But they don't produce the most amount of energy. For the same inverter rating, you're going to produce less energy. Even if they have multiple MPPTs, where they say, you can do short strings, you can do long strings, it's got 2 MPPTs or 6 MPPTs, whatever it is. If it's a string inverter, then you're not going to produce as much energy as an optimized inverter or a microinverter.
So with string inverters, even though they're cheaper over the lifetime of your system, you're probably not going to see as much.
Exactly. You're not going to see a better return on investment over the lifetime of the system. Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to microinverters.
Yeah, microinverters is the other dominant player in the industry. So microinverters are kind of a cool technology. They solve the problem that string inverters just fundamentally can't solve. And so when we see shade go across your solar panels, when you have a module that's shaded, it because it's in a series circuit, your current drops and it reduces power for the entire string. And that's a true fact. If the way microinverters solve this problem is they put an inverter underneath every single solar panel. So if you shade one panel, it doesn't affect any of the other panels because they're parallel circuits, so current is unchanged. Each microinverter adds current. So it solved the problem that string inverters had, which was this shade issue. But they're the most expensive solution, which is the opposite of what you want. Like for a string inverter, sure, you produce more energy, but it is the most expensive way to do it. And when we look at the longevity of the system, anytime you have to do maintenance or if you have to fix anything or repair anything, that means you got to get up on the roof. And that means you have to pick up solar panels. And that means you have to find the problem underneath solar panels. And for a service provider, for an installer, like that is something they don't want to have to do. And so from a homeowner's perspective, you could be down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 microinverters before your installer is willing to come out and do something because servicing those systems is challenging.
But on the opposite side, because you've got module level power electronics, you know exactly where the problem is. Whereas with like a string inverter, if a panel goes down, you don't necessarily know where it is. You just see a drop in production.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right.
Okay, so one of the things that always gets brought up with microinverters is micro clipping. And with modules getting bigger and bigger and bigger, we start seeing this a little bit more, right?
Yeah, so a microinverter has an AC nameplate rating, and usually it's like 300 or 315, maybe 350 watts. And we see these 400 watt panels and these 450 watt panels that are going these days. And that is a lot of clipping. That's a high DC to AC ratio. Now what micro clipping is let's imagine we have a roof that's east-west. Okay. And in the morning, you have the sunlight just blasting your east array. Well, every single one of those microinverters, because those modules are perfectly like in parity with the sun on the rising sun, then they're going to overflow. They're going to clip and you're going to lose energy. And then as the sun sets, same thing on the west side. So what is unique about a SolarEdge inverter is like we kind of play the best of both worlds. We're an optimized inverter. So we still have for lack of a better word, a string inverter on the ground. And then we have module level power electronics up on the roof. And so we have this big, I'm going to use this glass, we have this big bucket for all the energy to come into. And so when, as opposed to microinverters, when that sun rises, we capture all of that energy and we don't spill any of our energy out, right? It all goes into the big bucket. And then same thing when it sets on the west side. So if we had, if we used our cans here,
might not quite a pint glass here.
Yeah. And if we were to pour like our beer all the way into the beer glass, if you have a high DC to AC ratio, that's going to overflow. But what's nice is like if you have a big stein, you don't spill any drops of beer.
So with microinverters, you want to make sure that if you have a large size panel, you have a microinverter that can handle that amount of wattage. Otherwise, you're just leaving it up on the roof.
Yeah. So that's what micro clipping is. You clip at the micro level. And as modules get bigger, microinverter companies are going to have to figure out how to make bigger microinverters that can handle these bigger modules.
Okay. Let's see here. Moving on, we have optimized inverters.
Oh yeah, so that's what SolarEdge does. There's a couple of other players in the optimizer space. So what an optimized inverter is we have module level power electronics on the roof, but instead of converting to AC on the roof, we do a DC to DC conversion. And so we just take the voltage from the solar panel and then we either push it up a little bit or drop it down a little bit, depending on what's happening in the string. And then when it gets down to the inverter, that's when we invert on the ground. The beautiful thing about that is, yes, there's module level power electronics on the roof. However, it's a lot lower cost than a microinverter because we're not replicating all the switching components to go from DC to AC.
But again, we're getting all the benefits of having module level electronics. So if something does go wrong on the roof, I know it's that panel right over there.
Yeah.
And we can immediately go to the problem, fix the problem.
Right.
Or if it's on the ground, just work on the inverter on the ground rather than having to tinker around up on the roof.
Right, absolutely. And so the homeowner can really take a look and see, oh, what's happening on my roof? And they can open up their app and see what's happening on the roof. You can't do that with string inverters. And so with a string inverter, you could have a whole string that's down and you would have no idea why or when it happened. Like let's say a squirrel chewed through your wires or something like that. That string is now dead and it's not going to produce any energy for you and there's no way to track it. So that's why I really like module level power electronics. It gives me more control and visibility over my system. And then I really like optimized inverters because, again, it's less worry about the roof, what's happening on the roof, and then I have more ability to service the equipment when it's down on the ground. And so, yeah, if you're a homeowner, make sure you're getting some type of MLPE, and then I'll obviously recommend SolarEdge, but
But we'll try to be as impartial as possible. But so least expensive option would be string inverter. Most expensive would be micros, and then mid-tier would be optimized inverters.
exactly.
But you still get all the benefits of having
It's
module level electronics.
it's the best bang for your buck, right?
Yeah.
And so like when I review appliances and stuff, like I don't know if you've ever, so my wife and I are remodeling the kitchen right now. And so we're looking at appliances as part of the remodel, and I go to the high end first. I start at the highest end, most expensive things I can get. And then I'm like, oh, is this a refrigerator that tells me I'm beautiful every morning? Is it really worth that extra money? Or can I get something that is going to do the job well, and do it for a reasonable amount of money? And that's what SolarEdge is. Yeah. So it's the perfect best bang for your buck. You get a lot of benefits, very few weaknesses. And it may not tell me I'm beautiful every morning, but it definitely does the job.
I just want to say hey to Jeff. Hey, Joel, how you doing? Travis, good to see you guys. Jeff was saying, I really don't like string inverters because of the safety issue, because they're always on.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so that's that kind of goes back into the old days of what we call rapid shutdown. And the National Electrical Code makes us control the voltage from the rooftop, right? And string inverters use MLPE sometimes for that, so they'll use maybe a different optimizer. They'll use, not one made by SolarEdge, but somebody else. They might use a rapid shutdown device. And basically what that does is it kills the rooftop voltage before it gets down to the inverter. But in the strings, where that device is located, that's all still live. That sun is up, those panels are still hot.
So that squirrel you were talking about earlier that's nibbling on the wires.
Still poofed, as long as this circuit is closed. So maybe he's holding onto one wire that he already chewed and then he's chewing on another wire.
I laugh about it because I was just working with a homeowner who was like super upset because he was getting this error 25 on his inverter, and so I let him know what it was, which was an isolation fault, and it actually did end up being squirrels.
Oh, yeah.
Chewing their way through the wires.
Yeah, the squirrels, so they don't make wires like they used to. They used to make wires with peanut oil. And so the squirrels and rodents were attracted to wires that were made with peanut oil because peanuts.
Yep.
Now I think most wires are made with petroleum or some type of petroleum.
Yeah, this was an older system. Error 25, that's still one of our old screen inverters. They reached out to me because I've been here for a little while. So let's talk about batteries.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's AC and DC tied. There's different chemistries. There's all kinds of stuff that we need to talk about.
Sure.
Let's start with AC versus DC.
Yeah, so the terminology we use is AC coupling versus DC coupling.
Okay.
And I think both have their applications. Like they both have their strengths and they both have their weaknesses. So AC coupling means you have a solar array with a solar inverter, and then you have a battery with a battery inverter. Now, sometimes the battery inverter is inside the same box, so it doesn't look like two separate boxes. It's all included in the same battery box. So some people call it an AC battery. That's not what it is. It's still a battery with an inverter just inside of it, right? And so that's an AC coupled system. Where AC coupled has its strengths is it's great for retrofitting to something that you already have. Let's say you already have, like your neighbor, he already has a solar system.
Yeah.
AC coupled battery can work with anything that's already on the roof. So he could have an old SMA or Fronius or Enphase or SolarEdge or whatever. AC coupling will fit with that system no matter what it is. Okay. There's a trade-off though. When you AC couple, you have a least amount of efficiency for that battery. So when we charge our battery, what do we want to charge it from?
We want to charge it from the solar.
Solar, exactly right.
Yeah.
So we go from DC, which is the solar panels, to AC, which is the inverter, then AC again back to DC to charge the batteries. And then we want to use that energy, and we go DC back to AC. So we call that the triple conversion penalty. And that means your battery is like, even though a spec sheet may claim it's like 90% round trip efficiency, 94% round trip efficiency, you're not seeing the deficiencies of the solar inversion. And then you have to like take this inverter efficiency, multiply that by the battery efficiency in and the battery efficiency out. And it's complicated, but moral of the story is you lose about 3 days of total energy throughout the year.
So every time we swap from AC to DC, DC to AC, we're just losing a little bit.
Just a little bit.
But that little bit adds up over the lifetime of your system.
Yeah, do you remember the plot to Superman where they take pennies off of every transaction, like a fraction
I
of
thought
a
that was
penny?
Office Space.
Well, Office Space got it from Superman, but same thing. So yeah. So you just lose a little bit off the top every single day, and maybe on the day-to-day impact, you don't see it, but throughout the year, it's 3 days of energy that you're losing. Yeah. So the other technology is what we call DC coupled, and that's what SolarEdge offers. So SolarEdge, we go directly from the solar array, DC coupled, directly into the battery, DC. So DC to DC. So we don't suffer any inversion loss charging the battery. Now when we discharge the battery, we want to turn it to AC, which is used in our home. So we only hit one inversion penalty. So we're a lot more efficient. So the drawback to DC coupled technology is sometimes it's difficult to incorporate that into into existing systems. Okay. So if you have a SolarEdge system already, great, just upgrade it through the Re-Energize program and you can have a DC coupled system.
Link in the description.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's essentially the...
Yeah. So you can...
So the program is good.
Yeah. So the Re-Energize is a tech swap program, like you trade in your cell phone. Have you ever traded in your cell phone? Yeah, so exactly. So you say, I don't want my old inverter anymore. I want a new inverter. And SolarEdge is like, okay, here's a new low-cost inverter. Thank you so much. Get a battery. And so that's the tech swap program, Re-Energize. It's pretty awesome. But I digress. DC coupled is much more efficient, which is why any new system you're doing, should standardize on DC coupled. Like they've been doing it in Europe for years because of the efficiency. It is catching on in the US. Like a lot of new adopters are starting with DC coupled because 3 days of energy first year is like a lot, right?
I mean, for me, the practical benefit is going to be, hey, if I've got an interconnect agreement with my utility and I add batteries on the DC side of the inverter, I don't have to change my interconnect because my inverter is essentially staying the same. It's the same nameplate rating. Even if I go from a non-battery inverter to a battery inverter, it's still the same nameplate, so I don't have to change anything with my utility.
Yeah, so you can do that even with an AC. In California, you can do that with an AC coupled system too. There's a carve out that says if you're in NEM2 and all you do is add a battery, you can still stay in NEM2. But anytime you add solar, that's where the asterisks and caveats start to begin and start to pile up. But I think your statement is true for the rest of the U.S. Like if you're, let's say you're in Massachusetts or New Jersey or wherever else, I would agree with you, but you have to check with your jurisdiction to make sure, because I don't know all the utilities, but I think you're right. I think if you add a battery, don't change the name of the AC nameplate rating of the inverter, I think you're right. You just add your battery and you can now have a battery system.
And you don't need another breaker in your panel.
Oh yeah, that's
if your panel's already full,
Yeah, that's the other huge benefit of being DC coupled is there's fewer components on the AC side, and that's where systems get expensive. Anytime you add AC stuff, components, that's where system prices start to increase. Like, so instead of a 2-pole breaker, maybe you need a 4-pole breaker or 4 slots, or now you have to add sub panels. And yeah, so DC coupling makes system installation a lot easier and a lot less impactful on the homeowner. So you save a lot of breaker space.
All right, so this episode went a little bit long. We got really excited about talking about door knockers and what homeowners should know when they're buying a solar system, and we went like a full hour on that. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide this into 2 episodes. You'll see part 1 released first, part 2 released shortly thereafter, along with an episode about the NABCEP conference for all of our industry professionals.
Nice.
So really look forward to seeing you out there. Stay sunny.
Stay optimized.